Welcome back. I'm Paul James Johnson. This is The Work. A quick thing before we get started. If this episode raises a question about the training, the gear, the course, anything at all, put it in the comments. And if you've done this kind of training yourself or you're thinking about it, I'd like to know. 2 questions I'm asking this week. How do you manage heat in your long training days? And have you experimented with creatine? Drop your answers below. If you haven't seen the earlier episodes of The Work, the full series is on the channel. Week 4 through 10 are there waiting for you. Week 11 of 15, 4 weeks to the start line of Cocodona 250. This week the training moved off the familiar trails and onto the actual course, the Bradshaw Mountains, the terrain between Black Canyon City and Crown King. The stretch where on race day I'll be running from Deep Canyon Ranch to Crown King. 152 kilometers, nearly 3,000 meters of climbing, exactly 45 kilometers on Friday with my son Jeffrey, 8 hours and 56 minutes, finishing in the heat of the early afternoon in the Bradshaw Mountains. The course teaches you. That's what this week was about. This is week 11 of The Work. Let's get into it. Act 1, mediation in the morning, miles in the afternoon. There is a version of Monday that starts with a 6 a.m. alarm, a cup of coffee, and a quiet trail. This was not that version. Monday started at 6 a.m. Arizona time, 9 a.m. Eastern, on a video call with the Mediation Tribunal Association in Detroit. A full day of case evaluation. By the time the last case wrapped, it was past noon, which meant the Arizona desert had been awake and warming for hours already. You don't cancel the run, you adjust. A short rest, and then the shoes went on. The route was the Crown King Scramble course, a 50-mile race route that runs through similar Bradshaw Mountain terrain as portions of the Cocodona corridor, and a course worth knowing on its own terms. Net uphill, rolling, but climbing. Those 402 meters of gain over 20.31 kilometers don't announce themselves all at once. They accumulate, the way Bradshaw mountain climbing always does. The temperature was in the 90s at the start. By the time the 2 hours and 46 minutes were done, it had pulled back to 80, which felt like a gift. The cattle were out. The mountains were beautiful in the late afternoon light. A new pair of sunglasses got their first field test. The Jeff Galloway method held the pace together. Run, walk, a rhythm that doesn't ask permission from the accumulated fatigue of a morning spent mediating other people's disputes. Act 2, Rain in the Desert. The last day of March and Arizona did something unexpected. The Maricopa Trail from Happy Valley to Grand Avenue is the flattest stretch in the weekly rotation. 19.22 kilometers, 26 meters of elevation gain, 2 hours and 12 minutes of sustained tempo work. The 90-30 run-walk rotation from beginning to end. I know every rise and dip of this stretch. It's the commute. But there were clouds, real clouds, the kind Arizona doesn't typically produce in late March. The sun came up in the east and fought its way through cover all morning, and something unusual happened. I was sweating more than normal, and it wasn't evaporating the way desert sweat does. The dew point sat between 50 and 54 degrees Fahrenheit. A slight breeze, 0 to 6 miles an hour, not enough to compensate. The moisture was staying on the skin. It wasn't uncomfortable, it was just different. A reminder that the body calibrates to its environment. And when the environment shifts, even slightly, the body notices. One encounter worth recording. A gentleman on the trail with a large black dog, off-leash, who demonstrated a level of obedience that bordered on the extraordinary. The dog didn't bark, didn't flinch, didn't deviate one step from his master's side as I passed. Good dog. Exceptional dog, actually. Later that morning at pickleball, the rain came. Sprinkles, barely anything, but enough to wet the courts and end the session 30 minutes early. It was the first rain in 6 to 8 weeks. The desert accepted the offering and moved on. Act 3, starting tired, finding the rhythm. Wednesday started with fatigue, not injury fatigue, not illness fatigue, the kind that accumulates across weeks of consistent loading, that sits in the legs when the alarm goes off and says, maybe not today. The answer to that is always the same. Get to the trailhead. Start moving. See what happens. What happened? Within half a kilometer, the body found its rhythm. The run-walk clicked into place and stayed there for all 14.04 kilometers of the North Kiefer single track in the East Wing Mountain Preserve. 192 meters of gain woven through relentless rolling terrain in just over 2 hours. The kind of trail that mountain bikers love because it never gives you a sustained flat. The humidity sat at 63%. A northwest wind felt genuinely cool. Cloud cover kept the sun off. Several mountain bikers on the trail, 2 or 3 other trail runners. No wildlife worth noting, just the trail, the body adjusting to its load, and 14 kilometers logged on legs that had every reason to stay home. Some days the run teaches you something dramatic. Some days it teaches you that showing up is enough. Act 4, the monkey on your back. There is a gear problem that reveals itself only when you're running, not when you're packing. You load the main compartment of the vest, you cinch the straps. Everything feels right in the parking lot. And then you start running, and the weight in the back begins to move. Not a lot, just enough. A bounce, a shift, a monkey on your back that gets heavier with every kilometer. Thursday was 31.97 kilometers on the Crown King Scramble course, 693 meters of gain, 5 hours and 11 minutes on the clock. And somewhere in the first few kilometers, the Solomon ADV vest made its case known. 4 quarter-liter flasks in the main compartment. The weight distribution was wrong, and the bounce told me so. The fix took 10 minutes of experimentation and became one of the most useful gear notes of the entire training block. 3 of the quarter-liter flasks moved onto the waist belt, 1 in back, 1 on each side. The half-liter flask moved from the back to a front chest pocket. The apple relocated to the lower back compartment, snug against the body. The balance shifted instantly. The bounce stopped. It sounds minor. It isn't. On the Cocodona course, Cottonwood Creek comes in at kilometer 11.9 and Crown King at kilometer 58.9. That's nearly 50 kilometers of sustained mountain terrain between those 2 points, a section where fatigue is compounding and every unnecessary energy expenditure matters. A vest that bounces is a problem that compounds. A vest that sits still is one less thing to manage. The rest of the day was the desert doing what the desert does. Wild burros, a young one, clearly born this spring, skittish and quick. Cattle that wanted nothing to do with a passing runner. A beautiful orange butterfly drifting through the scrub. A small water flow near the Cow Creek Ranch. Water in the desert, announced by no one, always worth noting. Lake Pleasant appeared in the distance. 31.97 kilometers, 693 meters of gain, and the legs came home. I'd been listening to Flagstaff Bound, a special Cocodona preview series produced by the Distance to Empty podcast and Aravaipa Running. In an episode featuring Killian Korth, who swept the entire 200-mile Triple Crown in 2025, winning Tahoe, Bigfoot, and Moab in the same calendar year.
I do have some plans at Cocodona this year to experiment with taking large doses of creatine. So I'm thinking 25 grams, probably somewhere around midnight on night 1 and midnight night 2, to hopefully help deal with some of the effects of sleep deprivation as well. But that's going to be somewhat experimental this year.
He mentioned his plan for this year's Cocodona: 25 grams of creatine at midnight on night 1 and again at midnight on night 2 to help manage the effects of sleep deprivation. It's experimental, he said, but the early research is promising. It landed differently than it might have a year ago, because I know what the nights of Cocodona cost. In the 2025 Cocodona 250, I took 17 trail naps and slept a total of 9 hours across the entire race. The shortest nap was 5 minutes, the longest was 90. Around kilometer 79, the Crown King to Arastra Creek segment, somewhere around the 18-hour mark of the race, I felt the first pull of sleepiness. That's not sleep deprivation. That's just the body doing what bodies do when it's late and you've been moving for nearly a day. I laid down on the side of the trail for 5 minutes and kept going. True sleep deprivation in a multi-day ultramarathon is a different animal. It arrives on the 3rd night, or the 4th, or the 5th. It's cumulative, building across days of movement and minimal rest until the brain stops recovering between naps and starts doing things it shouldn't. By kilometer 393, deep in the night of day 5, somewhere on the trails above Walnut Canyon, that's where it found me. I began seeing trail art on the ground, elaborate, Picasso-like images inlaid on the trail surface, designs that seemed to repeat, as if someone had used a template. I asked my pacer, Jeffrey, about it. He said the only thing on the trail were footprints. Reading back on this now, I know what it was: visual hallucinations from sleep deprivation, a phenomenon called pareidolia, where the exhausted brain begins imposing familiar patterns onto random surfaces. The smooth, dusty trail under my headlamp was giving my mind just enough ambiguity to fill in the rest. I didn't have a name for it then, I just knew what I was seeing wasn't there. The tool I found that worked best was RevGum, caffeinated gum that absorbs through the lining of the mouth rather than the stomach. A caffeine pill swallowed on the trail takes 30 to 45 minutes to reach the bloodstream. RevGum arrives in 2 to 5 minutes. At kilometer 400, after a 15-minute nap, I took RevGum and within minutes felt genuinely sharp. For the race, it was my primary caffeine delivery system. Which brings us back to creatine and why Killian Korth's experiment is worth paying attention to. Your brain maintains its own energy reserves, compounds stored in the tissue itself that it can draw on when the demand is high and the supply is running low. One of the most important is phosphocreatine. During normal life, you don't notice it. During the fourth night of a 250-mile race, you do. Sleep deprivation systematically depletes those reserves. As they fall, the first things to go are the cognitive functions that feel the most effortful: working memory, reaction time, the ability to read a course marker in the dark and trust what you're seeing. By kilometer 393, mine were gone. What the research shows, including a 2024 study in Scientific Reports that measured brain chemistry in sleep-deprived participants, is that creatine supplementation can help maintain those reserves under exactly this kind of stress. The participants who took creatine before being kept awake performed better on memory and processing tasks than those who didn't. Their brains were holding on to what sleep deprivation was trying to take away. The constraint is timing. The brain doesn't absorb creatine quickly. Getting it across the blood-brain barrier and meaningfully into those reserves takes consistent daily use over several weeks, not a single dose the morning of the race. You have to arrive at the start line already loaded. Killian's midnight doses on nights 1 and 2 may provide an additional acute boost on top of that foundation. But the foundation has to be built first, which means starting now, 3 to 5 grams per day from this week forward. The goal is to be as prepared as possible when the third night comes, and the fourth. The nights when the brain stops seeing the trail for what it is and starts filling in the rest from somewhere else entirely. RevGum stays in the kit. Creatine joins it. The brain is going to need every tool available somewhere in the dark hours of Cocodona. Act 6, what the course costs. The alarm was 5 a.m. By 5:40, the house was dark, and we were loading the Ford Expedition. And somewhere in the community, a great horned owl was doing its work in the pre-dawn. Jeffrey was going with me. He had asked. We drove to the Black Canyon City trailhead off I-17 and were on trail at 6:40 a.m. Dawn was breaking. Within the first 2 kilometers, we heard them, wild burros braying across the canyon through which the Agua Fria flows. Loud and close enough that you understood you were in their territory. The weather was perfect. Upper 50s at the start, clear blue sky, low humidity, the kind of morning that makes you feel like you can run forever. You file that feeling carefully, because the afternoon will spend it. Just before the Agua Fria crossing at 2.5 kilometers, I fell. Right forearm, always the right forearm. Some blood, nothing structural. We crossed on rocks, feet dry, and began the climb out of the canyon. On the climb, I found a lump on the forearm, a raised contusion, visible enough that Jeff photographed it. Not particularly painful, just unusual in how quickly it had formed. We noted it and kept moving. At kilometer 12, the Black Canyon Trail meets the road north toward Crown King, the Cocodona specific turn. We took it. 5 kilometers of rugged fire road to Boulder Creek at kilometer 17 on the race course. 3 men in off-road vehicles, surprised to see runners. Cattle on the road ahead. Cattle move when you approach. We walked toward them. They went the other way, and we continued up. The second fall came in that section. Right forearm again, and here is the thing. When I got up and checked the arm, the lump from the first fall was gone. The second impact had apparently resolved the first. The body has its own logic. We turned around just past 22.5 kilometers and started back. The math, 22.5 kilometers remaining, the heat building toward its afternoon peak, and Jeffrey beginning to slow. Somewhere around kilometer 30 on the return, the heat made its full case. His pace dropped. I waited in the shade of a trailside bush, refilled one of his flasks from my reserves. Then, a kilometer later, soaked a buff in water and told him, "Wipe your face, put this around your neck, pull your hood over it." The wet buff, with a breeze at altitude, a small thing that buys real time. We reached the Agua Fria with less than 3 kilometers left. 10 minutes there, shirts soaked, hats soaked, buffs soaked. The final climb out of the canyon with wet clothes and a breeze felt briefly like air conditioning. Exactly 45 kilometers, 1,415 meters of gain, 8 hours, 55 minutes, 52 seconds. We drove directly to McDonald's. Jeffrey ordered a Big Mac, large fries, large Coke, and an ice cream. I had a McFlurry, a large vanilla milkshake, and a large Coke. Then we drove to the Trilogy Community Pool, showered, and sat in the hot tub until the day let go of us. The course teaches you. On Friday, it taught us both. Epilogue. The easy morning after Thursday's 31.97 kilometers and Friday's 45, Saturday's 22.4 was a different kind of run. Up at 5 a.m., out the door at 5:30, heading for the ISI Saturday morning meeting at the corner of Happy Valley Road and Lake Pleasant Road. The moon was bright, close to full, maybe exactly full. The great horned owl was in the neighborhood again, calling from somewhere in the dark as the garage door opened. The legs felt good. That was the surprise. After 2 of the hardest days of the training block, back to back, the legs came out easy and willing for 22.4 kilometers and 131 meters of gain across 2 hours and 33 minutes. Somewhere along the flat road miles, they started running more than the plan required, more than habit demanded, just because it felt right. The morning was clear and blue when the sun came up, temperature in the upper 50s going out, close to 70 coming back. Nothing technical, nothing eventful. Sometimes the body's response to hard work is to show you what it's building toward. Saturday was that response. The week closed at 152.94 kilometers and 2,859 meters of gain. The plan called for 148 kilometers, distance exceeded. Vertical 141 meters short of 3,000. A rounding error in a week that included nearly 9 hours in the Bradshaw Mountains. That's week 11. 152 kilometers, 2,859 meters of gain. 4 weeks to Cocodona. The miles are in the legs now. The Crown King course, the Agua Fria crossing, the climb out of the canyon in the heat of the afternoon. Jeffrey knows what those miles cost. So do I. Before I go, 2 questions for the comments. How do you manage heat on your long training days? And have you tried creatine as part of your race prep? I'll be reading everything you leave down there, and I'll respond. If you're new here, the full series, week 4 through 11, is on the channel. Start wherever you like. And if the journey feels like something worth following, subscribe. 4 weeks to May the 4th. There's more to come. Week 12 is already waiting. I'll see you there. I'm Paul James Johnson. This is The Work.